Hello everybody, welcome back. Today we have another very exciting game that was between Paul Morphy and Samuel Boden. The reason why I chose this instructive game was because the ending of this game is very interesting and unique. So without further ado, the game began with e4, e5, knight 3, knight c6, d4. Going into a scotch, e takes d4, and bishop to c4. Morphy being Morphy, he decides to go for the gambit variation of this opening. Bishop to c5, castles, d6, and c3. Knight to f6. This is a very questionable move because this gives white complete central control after c takes d4. Instead, I believe d takes c3, accepting the gambit is the most promising line in this variation. So c takes d4 was played after knight f6, bishop to b6, knight c3, castles d5, and now a terrible move by black, knight to a5. This is a terrible move because it's misplacing the knight, and it's not going to be very useful there if white starts some action on the king side, which he is going to do because that's the main plan in this line. So basically the knight will be completely useless there for the rest of the game. Instead, I believe knight to e5, exchanging the knights off after knight takes e5 and d takes e5, black is totally fine in this position. But knight a5 was played and bishop to d3. Now the knight on a5 is already starting to feel a little bit under pressure because white's threatening to play the move b4. And when b4 happens, the knight is going to be trapped. So c5 has to be played by black. But that just makes this bishop on b6 kind of hampered in by his own pawn on c5. So now we have two misplaced pieces in black's position, the bishop on b6 and the knight on a5, both of which will not be participating in any action anytime soon. So now bishop to g5 is played by white, a great move that forces black into a very uncomfortable position, because the only way that black can break this pin is by weakening the king side. This takes advantage of the fact that these two pieces are not participating in the action and cannot help break the pin. So h6 was played, bishop to h4, bishop g4, h3, bishop h5, and g4. Another great move that breaks the pin, gains space on the king side, and shuts black's bishop out of play. And after bishop to g6, you may argue that white just weakened his king side when he played the move g4. But that's not the case because black can't actually take advantage of the fact that white is quote-unquote weakening his king side. Do you know why that is? It might be because that he has two misplaced pieces on the queen side that can't do anything. So queen d2 was played, rook to e8, and rook ae1. Now bishop c7 was played, attempting to stop the move e5, knight to b5, and king to h7. So what this move tries to do is stop white's threat of bishop takes f6 and queen takes h6. But after king to h7, there are two very strong continuations for white. I would like you to pause the video here and find at least one of those two. So congratulations if you found the move e5. This is the strongest move in the position because after d takes e5, you have knight takes e7, queen takes e7, and d6. You will be immediately gaining the pawn back because after queen takes d8, there's knight takes e5. On d6, if you try to capture the pawn, the problem is you lose your queen due to bishop takes g6. And after f takes g6, there's queen takes d6. The other strong move in this position was bishop takes f6. This was the second strongest move in this position and was played by Morphy. G takes f6, and now the follow-up is very important, and that is knight takes c7. Of course, he could have gone the other way around and played knight takes c7 first, and then bishop takes f6. Either one would work. Queen takes c7, queen to c3. This move does two things. First thing it does is attack f6. The second thing it does is threaten to play b4, which will trap the knight. So queen to d8 and knight to h4. This is a very important move in this position. What this move does is clears the way for the f-pawn. And once the f-pawn can start rolling, the game will be decided because white will have a serious initiative. And let's take a look at the knight on a5. What is it doing? It's not doing anything. So that's why knight to a5 was such a terrible move like 10 moves ago. b6, f4, king to g7, and now knight takes g6. A very surprising move, but the follow-up is what is important. And after f takes g6, black just fixed his structure and exchanged off his terrible bishop on g6. So if white can't do anything in this position is an improvement for black compared to the previous position. But Morphy saw the move e5, which opens up the position. If you attempt to capture the pawn on e5 with d takes e5, I'll get to f takes e5 in a moment. The problem is f takes e5, queen takes d5, and e takes f6, which gains the pawn back and will be decisive because on king f8, there's f7, rook takes e1, and queen h8 check. Instead of king f8, if you try the move king to f7, there's an even more decisive combination, and that is bishop takes g6. After king takes g6, queen c2, and you will be checkmated very soon. Instead of d takes e5, if you try the move f takes e5, the problem is f takes e5, d takes e5, and rook takes e5. White has so much activity in this position that black is completely lost. There's no debate. So instead of capturing, black decided to play rook to c8, and now bishop to b1. A great idea by white. And now after this move, you can see white's intention when he played knight takes g6. It was to give black a weakness, and that is the pawn on g6. And what white tries to do is bring his queen onto this diagonal so that he can apply more pressure onto the g6 pawn. So king f7 was played, e6, king to g7, and queen to d3. This is slightly dubious. The move g5 would have immediately won the game for white because there's just so many threats that black has to take care of. The main threat being, of course, e7, which will immediately win the game for white, but he also has other ideas to worry about, such as king to h1 and rook g1, which will also win the game because g6. But queen d3 was played, and f5. G takes f5, queen f6, f takes g6, queen takes b2, and now the start of the brilliant ending of this game, f5. We start rolling the pawns. Queen to f6, e7. The intention of this move is rook to e6, which will be decisive because then the f-pawn will move. c4, queen to g3, c3, and now rook to e6. The rest of the game is pretty easy. You just need to advance the pawns up the board. Queen d4 check, queen f2, queen takes d5. Of course, if you trade the queens, nothing's different because rook takes f2, f6 is still going to come, but queen takes d5 is played instead. f6 check, king h8, g7 check, king h8, f7, king takes g7, and queen f6 is checkmate. I hope you found today's game instructive and also a bit entertaining. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. Goodbye.